So lately I've found myself on the r/bass subreddit, just kind of perusing, talking shop with my fellow bass enthusiasts, and I found a post that someone made that's very related to a video topic that I kind of already wanted to make a video on, so I figured this is a good time. And what I wanted to talk about, you know, some crazy clickbaity thumbnail idea of like the problem with YouTube bass. The problem with learning from YouTube. So I guess the first thing I'll say is if you're learning from YouTube and you're self-taught, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some pitfalls, and I think this comment really clarifies those pitfalls and exemplifies them. Hello, fellow wonderful bass players. It's a very wordy intro there. I was initially a self-taught bass player when I progressed into what I would call an advanced beginner stage, where I've learned basic fundamentals like plucking with alternating fingers, muting unplayed strings, basic theory, major minor scales, understanding rhythm. He's basically mastered music. Basically to the point where I could start playing simple songs and jam with others somewhat competently. So he's got a good bass line, a good basis for his playing. He's got he's learning, right? I have a full-time day job as well as young kids, which leaves me very little time. Decided it would be beneficial to engage in private lessons to speed up my development, as pure self-learning is simply too inefficient and taking too much time. Okay, so first of all, he says here that he's learned fundamentals like alternating fingers, great. Muting unplayed strings, that's actually a big one. I'm actually really impressed that he even mentioned that. That's one of the least cool aspects of playing the bass, is muting the strings that you're not playing, because they will ring, and they will, if you're not careful, they'll start ringing out louder than the strings you are playing. Basic theory like major and minor scales, understanding rhythm. So major and minor scales, I mean, if you can play them, that doesn't mean you know how to apply them. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Understanding rhythm, does he understand rhythm? I don't know. So let's get into his expectations for a private bass teacher. For some context here, I've been teaching private music lessons almost exclusively now for 4 years, and off and on for like 6 years before that. Not just on bass, but a lot of bass lessons. Okay, number one, he doesn't want to follow a predetermined syllabus and end up taking an exam and getting a cert. I don't know where he's from or if that's a thing for private lessons, but predetermined syllabus you might have a teacher might use for sure. But exams and certification, that's more like college. I don't think you're going to get that from a private teacher. Anyway, should be a customized syllabus based on collaborative effort between student and teacher to identify where the student desires to learn, what the teacher identifies as areas of weakness, blah, blah, blah. The teacher should have some well thought out materials, exercises that address specific topics. And then he says it doesn't even have to be original, it could just be YouTube videos, which is what he's already doing, right? He's just, at that point, you're asking your teacher to curate the YouTube videos that you watch, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to be too hard on this guy, because he's learning and it sounds like he's doing great. But I think his predicament illustrates the issue with just learning from YouTube. He says he doesn't want to follow a predetermined syllabus, which I guess it just depends on what his definition of that is. Now, a lot of people, when they're learning, they kind of think of music as a destination. Like, I'm here with my playing. I want to be able to do this. And so they'll do everything they can to get to that end point, to get to be able to play some song or play some style that they really like. And those are good goals to have, because they can help guide you and they can help motivate you to keep going. Where the issue lies is underestimating the steps, the journey you have to take to get from here to here. And the problem with just going on YouTube is you'll get a little bit of information here and from here and from here and from here and from here. And it leaves a lot of these gaps. And I've taught quite a few students over the years who were either self-taught or learned from YouTube prior to coming to lessons with me. And that is the hardest thing about teaching them, is trying to find those gaps. And he then goes on to say that he's had 2 private teachers now, and they did not meet his expectations. The topics seem to be decided ad hoc on the spot at the beginning of each class without prior prep. This means there's no coherent learning material driving the lessons. This makes the lessons feel very spontaneous, disjointed, and unstructured. Which is, he gets blasted in the comments because it is kind of hilarious that his number one expectation was that he didn't want a predetermined syllabus. And then his number one critique was that the lessons were not predetermined. It's funny. I get what he's saying. But he's also asking a lot from just a private teacher to put that much work into each student they have, right? I mean, I have almost 40 students every week. There's no way I can spend that much time on each one prepping their lesson, which I'll get to. Well, let me keep going here. And then the second issue he has is, despite having expressed preferences for topics to work on, the teacher generally ignores them and decides on the topic they are more comfortable in teaching rather than what is requested or improving an identified weakness. So I think here it sounds like they're not telling him what he wants to hear, or her, I should say, I don't know. The teachers aren't telling this person what they want to hear, and they don't like that. That's the gist I get from that, because if you're going to a teacher, ideally they have way more experience playing, teaching, and learning the instrument than you do. And if they're saying, no, we shouldn't work on these things you want to work on, we should work on this, chances are good there's some solid reasoning for why they're not just following your advice for how to handle the lessons. But then again, I don't know these teachers. Maybe he just had bad teachers. That's also very possible. You know, maybe a student who is headstrong, thinks they know what they need, with a teacher who maybe isn't as experienced, doesn't know how to handle someone who can already play. I just want to make a quick interjection here that I found a reply comment later on in the video where he goes into a little more details about some of his interactions with the two teachers here. He's not as being unreasonable as it kind of comes across. I think if he should have included more context that he sort of slowly unpacks in the replies as people are like grilling him and prodding him and making fun of him for some things he said. But overall, he's actually pretty reasonable about this whole situation. But it still talks to my point about the issues with learning just from YouTube videos. And, well, you'll see. Let's just back to the video. It could be a little bit of both. I will say this. He doesn't like the fact that the topics seem to be just coming up on the spot, right? Sort of ad hoc. The way I teach, the way that it should go is that you have some very specific things that you're working on, whether it's in the classical world, it's like a piece of music or an etude, or maybe for more modern music, it's like you're working on a song or you're working on scales or some specific technique that you're working on, right? The idea is I give you something to go practice. You come back the next week having practiced it, and then I can give you some tips on how to improve it, or we can check it off and sort of figure out what to do next, which is why we come to my next point. I really like finding a book to use with all of my students. Some really don't like it, and that's okay. You know, we'll sort of work from the book here and there, but also learn lots of songs and other things in addition. And other students really thrive with it. Some students just really thrive with the structure of having a methodical, all right, I got to practice this. And then they come in, I tell them how to fix it. And then we know exactly what's coming next. It's just the next page in the book, right? And we work on that. And if you find a good method book as a teacher that works for you and your students, you can always supplement, right? You can always do the other things that like this guy's wanting to learn here, wanting to focus on. You can always spend part of the lessons working on those things. But sometimes it's not so clear if those things are beneficial or what they even are. And then you just focus on the book for a while until something comes up, or they get just absolutely bored of the book and are refusing to practice, and so you try something else. I think that's the biggest hang-up people have when they're trying to learn just by watching YouTube videos, is that there isn't like a clear path to step-by-step get to where you want to be, and you end up having all those gaps, like I said. But having a book that you work through really helps, and I've to the point where I've considered making my own. And then every time I have that thought, I remember that the Hal Leonard bass method exists, and I'm like, why bother? So if any bass players are out there watching and you want to self-study on your own and you just want a book, work your way through the Hal Leonard book series. This one right here. The Hal Leonard Bass Method Complete Edition with online audio. So it's spiral bound. There's recordings of all the tracks, and it's $30. I mean, there's no way. I mean, eventually I do want to have some sort of method available. But honestly, like, this will probably be just like, go do this, and then you can follow up with these things that I'm offering, because this is like, and I think this is we live in this age of tabs and of YouTube and learning things as fast as possible and using patterns and shortcuts and the secrets to playing music and these top 10 bass fretboard knowledge strategies, right? But the reality is, music, just like anything else, is a discipline. And if you can have the discipline to pick up this Hal Leonard book and learn to read the sheet music every day, 10, 15 minutes, work on that book and just go through it, like straight through, right? Once you get to somewhere in book 2, it starts having scales. And then you can kind of jump around a little bit, like work on a couple scales, and then keep moving on in the book. And then, like, every time you practice, like every week, add a couple scales, as well as keep going through the book, kind of thing. But then again, it's like all in this book for $30, and it's got. But the problem is, it's boring. It's really boring. Some of the exercises are better than others. In terms of like how fun they are to play, but they're all very, very useful, and there's a lot to be learned in that book. Let's go back to the post. The first comment right here. You don't want a predetermined syllabus, but you also don't want spontaneous unplanned lessons. Yeah. And okay, here's the other thing. He wants a customized syllabus based around the skills the teachers haven't been able to assess yet. I think that's the biggest thing here. He doesn't say how long he went to each of those 2 teachers he tried, whether it was 1 lesson, 2 lessons, 3. I know if it was me and this was my student coming in, I mean, it would likely take 3 or 4 sessions to even start to get a grasp or even an idea of where they're at and what maybe they need to do. I think this guy kind of hits the nail on the head. He says, your expectations are, and I mean no disrespect, silly. You're still new, so putting it bluntly, you don't know what you need. And that's what I was getting at with this second point he made here about his problems with his instructors, was that despite having expressed preferences for topics to work on, the teacher generally ignores them and decides on the topic. But yeah, exactly. You don't know what you don't know, and the teacher is probably seeing something that's very obvious to them that you need to be working on before whatever it is you're wanting to work on. There's a lot of nuance to playing any instrument, and if you're not having someone point out those nuances on a regular basis, you're going to miss quite a bit. A big one is a lot of students who are self-taught, especially on guitar. I do teach guitar too. I know, for shame, but they don't use their pinky, like, at all. And then it becomes like a big sticking point when I'm trying to like get them to use their pinky, because that's the other thing that happens is if there's something with their, you know, like on bass, if there's something that isn't quite vibing with their right hand technique or the way their fingers are positioned, and you're asking them to fix it, it's very tough, because suddenly it's like they've made all this progress playing this certain way, and then you identify something that maybe they don't feel like they need to fix because they can't see how it's holding them back. And so then when they do try to fix it, they feel like they're taking 8 steps back because suddenly, oh, well, I can't play this lick anymore, you know, because they have to relearn it using proper technique. Here's another comment that My teachers were like that too. I had one good one that listened and adapted and bothered to remember what we were working on and chose songs and practice material that helped me reach my goals. That's 1 out of 7 teachers. There's no way to know if, like, we can't be a fly on the wall in these situations. There's always 2 sides to every story. And, you know, maybe I'm just underestimating how many bad teachers are out there. I don't know, because to me that's what teaching is you kind of have to meet the student where they are, and because if you just drill the book or just the things you want to do, and the student isn't that motivated, they're gonna lose interest, and then you're either gonna lose them as a student or they're gonna just quit the instrument, which is even worse. Oh, he has a big post here. I found this in a reply to a different comment. It is not a single thing that I want to learn and get better at, but many things like improving music theory, how to apply them practically, how to improve my timing and groove, to study a specific genre and its intricacies, walking bass lines, techniques like moving from a 4 to a 5 string, and just too many to list, really. Yeah, maybe, he says, what I'm not too happy about is the classes usually does not have a prior decided agenda. So we go into the classes and spend maybe the 10 or 15 minutes deciding what to learn today, which is generally decided based on the teacher's mood. Finding online materials that might suit the topic. I'm glad I found this reply, because this actually clears up a lot. Maybe he just has bad teachers. But I think it's still even more relevant to my initial concept that being self-taught and just learning from YouTube has many pitfalls. Because here he is trying to get better and fill in those gaps he knows he has, and he can't find the right teacher. And who's to say that if he would have been studying with one of these teachers for this long, would he be any better off now? I don't know. It's hard to say. This comment, I believe a good teacher can make the tedious parts more fun. For example, I always found bass buzz to be genuinely entertaining. This is a point I was thinking about before I even started filming. The whole concept of YouTube is an entertainment platform. Where that falls short in the terms of music education, or really any educational content, is that if you really want to be disciplined and intentional about studying anything, there's going to be times where it's tedious and boring and dull, right? And that's just the reality. There's just no way to make a high energy video and brightly colored video and use that to cover up just how boring some things you have to learn are, right? And if you are making a video that's like that, chances are you're not getting into the meat and potatoes of that topic. Well, I think I've pretty much I don't need to keep talking about this, but if you wanna go read more of the conversation, formulate your own opinions, here it is, right here on r/bass. Am I wrong in my expectations for private bass lessons? Go find it on Reddit. Make a comment below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. What are your thoughts on this whole thing? Pin Pan Poochie, if I'm saying that right. If you're watching this, I hope I didn't mean to be harsh on you. Especially once I read that reply, just for future, you definitely should have said how long you were taking lessons, because you made it sound like you had like one lesson with each teacher, and then were immediately just like, no thanks. Well, but anyway, no hard feelings. You're learning bass. Great job.